Welcome to the Law Firm Growth Podcast, where we share the latest tips, tactics, and strategies for scaling your practice from the top experts in the world of growing law firms. Are you ready to take your practice to the next level? Let's get started.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Law Firm Growth Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Jan Roos, and I am here today with Andrew Wilcox, who is the president of Wilcox and Hackett, LLC. So Andrew is an expert on one of the most important things, in my opinion, about growing a business, which is the quality, type, and timing of people that you're bringing into your business, into your law practice. So I'm really excited to speak with him, and thank you for coming on the show, Andrew.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
All right, awesome. So I wanted to ask you, it's kind of an interesting niche that you found yourself in. How did you get into recruiting for law firms?
When I graduated college, I did what everybody wanted to do back in the late 90s, which was either sell IT or pharmaceutical sales. And so I started out in IT. When the bubble burst, I actually got a call from a recruiter to go work with a little company called Westlaw. And so for about 3 years there, I was your friendly neighborhood Westlaw rep and worked with FindLaw, sold to the state government, but also to small, mid-sized law firms. Mostly it was, personal injury, criminal, family law, but some of the, I guess you could say, the defense side or commercial side as well. And as crazy as it sounds, I really enjoyed working with attorneys. And I had somewhat of a strange confluence of events where I was about to have a child. We were building a house. I figured, let me just throw as much stress into my life as possible. And I had a few people say, you know what, I'm a recruiter. You know what, you'd be great at this. And I had a couple of firms that approached me and said, you know what, you're out in the market. Do you know a good litigation associate? And I'm like, oh, as a matter of fact, I do. And I had another firm ask me about an environmental associate. I'm like, well, actually, I know one over here too. So I had my first two placements, I guess, while I was with Westlaw. And I had a recruiter down in South Florida kind of took me under her wing. And I came out and I said, you know what, I could kind of do this on my own. And I felt like my sales and marketing background, my business background really lended itself to, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it on my own. And so I've been doing this since 2003, primarily started out working with associates, and now I primarily work with partners and groups with some associates. I mostly throughout the Southeast, but I also have placements in Seattle and just placed somebody out in Las Vegas and Reno. So it's kind of a smattering around the country, but for the most part, my focus is on the Southeast.
Okay, super interesting. And I mean, I don't know how much recruiting you've done outside of the law, but what do you think the challenges are with hiring in the field of the law versus just recruiting in general?
Well, because of the complexity of what some law firms are looking for, I have some firms that come to me and say, hey, you know what, we're looking for a litigation associate, this many years to this many years. And depending on the firm, they're going to want a certain pedigree, the type of law school they went to, the type of grades that they graduated with. But also, and I don't want to throw the generation under the bus here a little bit, but somewhat work ethic as well. And I've heard that a lot over the last probably 10 years. One of the reasons why I don't work with associates as much anymore is around 2009, 2010, I had 8 associates get 8 offers in 1 month, and they all turned them down. And it was, and so let me reverse engineer some of that. Some of it was my managing partner was mean to me on a Friday, so I decided I want to look for another opportunity. And they would go through the entire process for a month and a half. And they said, well, you know what, they're nicer to me now, so I'm going to stay put. They'd make a move for $2,000, to go from one firm to another. I had other ones that, hey, I live closer to one city. I'm commuting for an hour. And when they went to give notice to their firm, they said, well, we like you. If you want to live and work an hour away, that's fine. We just want you to stay working with us. So they turned down the opportunity there. So I think a lot of it is trying to get through some of that business acumen or some of the, hey, why are you? I think there's a lot of short-sightedness on the associate side as far as, hey, this is a move. I could always make another move and all that. And they don't realize is after 2 or 3 or 4 moves, it really becomes tough to make that right move. So it's all very much in the moment, in the instant. I need to make a move now and all that, rather than taking a 5 or 10 or 15 year look on their career. And I think when you're in your 40s and 50s and 60s, you have a level of perspective that you're able to look back and say, yeah, you know what, if I had waited 3 months more, maybe the right opportunity would have come along, rather than jumping on an opportunity and now that wasn't right. Now I've got to find another opportunity and some of those type of things. I think you just have a level of perspective. And like I said, I don't want to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, get off my lawn type of old man or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I think for law firms, they have to filter through that And I think that doing more diligence, I used to have people that would go through a series of interviews in one day where they'd meet with 3, 4, 5 people, and then they get an offer at the end of the day. And I think that law firms are being smarter about that. They're dating longer, for lack of a better term. You meet with somebody, you meet with them a different time of the day. Maybe you meet with them, a couple of people at a time or whatever like that. And you date, you court for a while, and you find out, is this somebody that over a period of time that they're a good candidate, they're going to be a good fit for us. Sometimes you lose people like that, but for the most part, small law firms, in my opinion, have to be more diligent because they can't swing and miss on a candidate only to find out 6 months later that it was the wrong person. You could bury somebody like that in a big law firm and say, you know what, we'll transfer them somewhere else, or we'll give them another year. But you could take a significant hit in a small law firm if you're 3, 4, 5 attorneys. You hire an associate to work with you, and you're having to spend more time mentoring and training them and all that than actually, then your leverage is gone. So I think more than anything else for the small and mid-sized firms, being more diligent and vetting people more effectively as well. Because I think small and mid-sized firms have a lot to sell. They may not pay as much as the mega firms or whatever like that, but I think that they have a lot of other things that they could sell a candidate. But there is that courtship process.
Right. And you bring something up that's really interesting too, because it's like there's no standardized test for work ethic or trainability or anything like that. And the kind of work that you're able to do for somebody as a recruiter, hopefully is a huge source of value to them not being able to see those blind spots themselves. So how do you help gauge that? Like, what are the characteristics of someone that is going to be a good fit versus somebody who looks flaky or might not be the best down the line?
Well, frankly, a lot of attitude. When I talk to somebody who's made a move 2 or 3 or 4 times, or maybe it's their first time, and there's not, emotional intelligence is always kind of a big buzzword right now and everything.
Right.
But when I start talking to them and the reasons that they're looking to make a move are not business related, it's, again, the managing partner's mean to me, or this person was a little intense, or I have a tough time doing this, or, everything is all about, it's always somebody else's fault. It's always somebody else's issue. I have a tough time dealing with. Those are red flags to me. And if they're red flags to me, they're going to be red flags to the firm. As I said, I spend a lot of time talking to law firms, especially, the small firms. When I talk to them about what their goals are, every firm has some variation of a no jerk policy, but they also, one of the reasons why I bring value to them is they put an ad out there. They're probably going to get 1,000 resumes. They're looking for 5. Maybe from all the different sources that really match up to what. So my value is to bring somebody to them that can they do the work? Are they qualified? Do they meet the minimum qualifications? If they're looking for a 2 to 4 year or 3 to 6 year or whatever like that, within that range, do they have the pedigree that they're looking for? Do they come from a specific law school? Does that matter to a law firm? Do they have, if it's estate planning or something like that, do they have an LLM? What type of work have they been doing up to this point? So a lot of their backstory. Have they worked their way through college? Are they where have their failures been? How do they respond to those? Is it something that, again, is it always somebody else's fault, or are they willing to share their war stories a little bit? Yeah, I took a little bit of a bloody nose on this one, or I remember I had to do this, and this was a lot of hard work, but I came through that. Those are the stories I'm looking for, because those are people that, when it gets intense, and it's going to get intense, especially in a small firm where everybody's kind of around each other. Is everybody going to be in a foxhole together, or is this going to be somebody who, hey, somebody said something the wrong way, or they were a little bit mean, and now there's closed doors and people need to vent, and that becomes somewhat, and I hate to mix my metaphors here, it becomes kind of a cancer in the clubhouse. And in law firms, especially smaller law firms, if they've got a good little thing going on, the last thing you want to do is introduce an element into that firm that is divisive. And again, that's not able to do the work. It's not bringing value. So, like I said, that's usually the big thing when I'm talking to attorneys is, tell me about what you've done wrong and how you fixed it. Tell me about why you're looking to make a move. Is it a business issue or is it a personal issue? If it's a personal issue, is it something you could work out? If it's somebody who's been harassed and that's something that is very serious, or they're at a firm that culturally is not a good fit for them, okay, but let's talk about that a little bit more. But I try to unpack the reasons why. And again, if it's, hey, I'm looking to make a move because I want to become a partner. I'm not on a partner track at my firm. I need a firm that's going to mentor me. I need a firm that's going to be able to do this. I want to be able to market. I want to be able to take that next step in my career. Well, that's a business issue. If it's my firm is holding me back and I can't do this, and everybody's mean to me and all that, then I always say drama tends to travel, and that drama will travel. So
yeah, I was gonna say, it was like that old thing. It's like, if you run into a jerk on the way to work, maybe you ran into a jerk. If you run into a jerk every day of the week, then, chances are you might want to start looking inward, right?
Yeah. If it's always somebody else's fault, then it's probably your fault,
Yeah. Okay. And then to kind of dig in on something too. So we've talked about, like a lot of the thing too. And then this is something we were talking about a little bit on the pre-call, was basically, small firms versus big firms. So what kind of advantages does one of those smaller firms have against one of the bigger firms in terms of presenting something that that a top tier candidate would want to work for?
Well, it becomes really difficult. I will tell you that in all candor, in the years that I've done this, when it's been between a big firm and a small firm, usually the big firm wins out. People can get romantic about the small firm and they can say, oh, I loved everybody there. They were great and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, a lot of it, especially at that age, when you have maybe student loans or you're trying to get ahead or whatever like that, and you're trying to make a move to a firm that maybe a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan or whatever, they're willing to leave a little bit of money on the table. But if you're looking about one of the AM Law top 20 firms or whatever like that, that just becomes, they're just going to throw a lot of resources. And everybody's been in their 20s and 30s and all that. If the choice is I'm a 2nd year, 3rd year associate, and I'm going to make $180,000 over here, or I'm going to make 90 or 110 or 120 over here, the things that would sell me, first of all, it tends to be more of a boutique. So if it's estate planning, I'm working with really good estate planners. These are people that, and not only that, they're doing the math. They're realizing, what, in 5 or 10 years, when I'm ready to become a partner, I may be in a position where those partners are looking to retire and I could ultimately take this practice over. They've built up a great practice. These are good people doing good work. I can come to work every day and I'm not being flown all over the world. I'm not having to deal with, I can work with really good attorneys in a really targeted area. Well, then that has a selling point. But for the most part, once you get outside the niches, if it's a general litigation, you're looking for somebody that is looking for something a little bit different. And frankly, some of those issues are going to be, maybe it's a family. They don't want to, I've had plenty of associates that have worked at your AM Law 20 firms that they haven't had a holiday off in 3 years, 4 years.
Yeah.
Those people talk. So the idea of, hey, I can make $180,000 a year, but I'm never going to be home. I'm never going to see my family. That's a tough sell, as opposed to, hey, I'm in a small firm and we have our holiday parties and everybody goes to each other's kids' showers and birthday parties and all that kind of stuff. It takes somebody who really wants to be part of that. But when you come out of law school, most attorneys are type A personalities. They come out, you go to a top law school for a reason. You try to finish at the top 5 or 10% of your class for a reason. And so you at least want to go to one of those large firms, frankly, and you want them to beat you up for a few years so that you can pay back your student loans.
Yeah.
But after 4, 5, 6 years, you could say you've hit major league pitching. And if that means that from that point, you're going to a small mid-sized firm, usually you're getting them after that first or second move with the idea that, okay, now I want to become a partner. Now I want to make a book of business. I don't want to give away a disproportionate share to, offices all over the world. I don't need 1,000 attorneys. I just need a handful of attorneys that do really good work and I could run my practice really well. That's the picture that smaller firms have to paint attorneys is, what is your upward mobility? What resources can we give you here? Can you achieve what you want to achieve? And painting that vision so they could actually see that, because a lot of times, like I said, their eyes have been set on, I want to go to Cravath, I want to go to New York, I want to go to DC, I want to go to SCAT, and that's great. It's being able to take that mindset and saying, do you need that? Or it's almost like the Doc Hollywood thing. Do you need that big plastic surgery out there in LA? Or could you practice really good family law, here in this town, right? Or family medical. I'm mixing up all the metaphors there, but you get the idea, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting too, because I'm seeing like sort of a convergence. Because like one of the things that you mentioned earlier is like there's sort of this new trend, and this isn't anything that anyone doesn't know, but it's like as far as just like millennials wanting to pursue lifestyle balance and maybe having a little bit more purpose in their work and that kind of thing. But it kind of seems like for some of the people who are really, really dug in on that as being an important thing, small firm might be the way to go. And
again, I don't want to talk about the large firms. The gap between the small firms, what the small firms and the large firms can offer to those people, I think has shrunk, because as long as you had a high-speed internet connection, as long as you could log on, you could work for a firm really anywhere. But you have to have a firm that has that vision as well. And usually it's somewhat in a region. If you don't see somebody from Atlanta at a small firm, and then you have somebody that, hey, I want to move to Denver. or I want to move to Salt Lake City or, Bend, Oregon or whatever like that. It's, hey, it's a small firm in Atlanta. Maybe that person lives in Chattanooga, or they live in Noonan, or they live, something like that,
Right.
where it's, if I need to plug into the mothership, they're there, they're an hour or two away. But for the most part, I can go do what I need to do outside the house. The other thing from an associate standpoint, and this is more associates, is that loss of communication. And I think that's one of the things that's been lost. Some firms have done it better than others. But when you don't see each other, one of the bigger selling features of a smaller firm is, again, being able to walk down the hall and you could have a lot of conversations with people really targeted, and they're more accessible like that. And I think large law firms, you have those where I want to be able to see what my associates are doing. I want my associates to come in here. I want us to be able to work like that. With your small law firms, that's going to be a challenge.
Right.
If I've got a 5-person law firm here and I'm in Tallahassee and I have an associate that lives in Jacksonville, it's tough for me I could be on Zoom calls, I could text them and all that kind of stuff. But unless they're really a go-getter and a self-starter and they're getting with me and we have that really worked out, that's going to be tough. I'm going to want them around me so that there's not a miscommunication there.
Right. So, and it's possible to get those benefits, but you really have to lean into it. And I think honestly, that's something that's really interesting, because I feel like the larger firms tend to have the better infrastructure at the end of the day too. So it's it might not be something that people have thought about, but it's something that's definitely come to everyone's doorstep in the last year for sure.
Yeah.
And I also wanted this is something that you brought up that I thought was really interesting. So kind of the people that are doing the math, right? So let's say that you have, and this is something that we've talked about with other guests. So it would be interesting to kind of triangulate what you think about this, Andrew. So basically, what do you think of the strategy of people who are looking for succession planning? What does that arc look like? And is it a realistic path to take in terms of getting somebody to eventually replace you if you're, seeing the end of your career coming in 5 or 10 years?
Right. Well, and we talked about here a few minutes ago, really the succession planning comes down to one of 3 different paths. We've got a good group of folks here. We need to build out. We need to add more people to that. We need to start mentoring people that we have here to take this practice over, take this firm over. Or, hey, we've got a small group of attorneys here. We really don't want to do any of that. We just want to be able to plug in with a law firm, and ultimately they take care of the clients. They take care of our associates. There's 1 or 2 partners who are maybe a little bit younger, but nobody really wants to take over the firm. We just want to plug in and be able to have their administrative capabilities, their full service capabilities, and some of those type of things. So really there's 3 different paths to that. The one thing I will tell you, I had a law firm down in Miami that went from about 50 attorneys down to 10 or 15. They told me that they wish that they had done their succession planning 20 years earlier, because now the choices are being made for them rather than them making the choices. Because they've asked me and said, hey, can you go find partners with books of business? I'm like, well, what exactly am I selling them on? Because they're going to look around and they're going to see 3, 4 partners that are taking a good share out. They're coming in a couple of days a week and they're all pushing 70 years old. So I don't be mean, but they're going to look around and they're going to say, well, that's great. The only option for that partner to come in is, okay, I could take this firm over someday. But if that's not where the law firm mindset is, and we just want to bring in revenue so that we can keep feeding ourselves and all that, what attorney that has a good practice is going to come do that? I would actually question that. Why would you leave a Greenberg Traurig to go to a 10-person firm and, to do something like that? So I would tell you that it's never too early to start on succession planning. The other thing too is communicating that up and down the firm. If you've got associates or if you've got junior partners, maybe service partners, and I've got a partner I'm actually friends with, that his firm would be in a ideal situation for succession planning. Every attorney there, all the main partners are in their late 60s, early 70s. He's been with the firm since he graduated law school. He started out as a clerk, went to an associate, became a partner, works well, just a great guy. He said, if they've got a succession plan, I don't know anything about it. Well, that's unfortunate, because he's going to get a call from somebody like me that says, you know what, they may come in on a Monday and say, I've had enough already. We're going to fold up shop, or 2 or 3 people are retiring and now nobody knows what's going on. Meanwhile, if you wanted that partner to be groomed, that partner should have been groomed for the last 2 or 3 or 4 years and brought into those meetings and been part of that process, so that when those attorneys leave, hey, you know what, we're handing this over to somebody that we've brought along. It's kind of our homegrown candidate, so that in 10 years, 15 years, they're still having lunches together and how's everything going? And let's share war stories and all that. That's the ideal situation. But a lot of firms, They really want to hold tight to, no, we're only making this decision. It's only going to be 3 or 4 of us. We don't need to get anybody involved. And unfortunately, that's how you take a 50-person mid-sized firm, let's say, down to 15, because I don't know if this firm's going to be around in a couple of years. Let me go ahead and explore other options. And you start having groups of 3, 4, 5 leave, and then you're down to that small group. And then again, decisions start getting made for you. The other thing I'll tell you is this, and I hear this a lot from small and mid-sized firms, is, well, how much is my practice worth? What could I sell my practice for? And I caution people on that because, I don't, other than maybe 2 practices in my entire time of doing this, I've never heard of a firm buying another firm outright. Because let's face it, when there's a merger, when there's a succession plan, when somebody leaves, it's what I call a triggering event. So if you've got a small firm and they're used to servicing those clients and those clients are perfectly happy with them, now we say we're going to merge with this other firm. Well, you know what? Now my rates are probably going to go up. Well, now I've got to deal with bureaucracy. Now, instead of me calling this attorney I've known forever, now I've got to call through this phone chain to get to this person. Well, you know what? What are my options? Maybe there's another small firm that's like them that I could at least explore my options with. So you may say that you've got a $2 million or $3 million or $5 million worth of revenue, but if you leave and you join, you can't really sell that. Those aren't quote unquote institutional clients because those clients may leave. So the idea of, well, how do you mark that then if you're a mid-sized firm trying to buy them? So a lot of it is kind of equity credits or some sort of trailing, revenue or trailing, I don't want to say commission, but hey, you're going to move into enough counsel role over the next couple of years and you're going to pay you out over a certain period of time, and we'll pay you a little bit more on the front end. But really they're kind of taking a headache off of these people's shoulders. So,
right.
So yeah, but the idea of, we're going to pay you 2.5x what your revenues were for the last 2.5 years or the last 2 or 3 years. That's probably not the case. So I caution your small and mid-sized firms to say, oh, you know what, we're going to build up and then we're going to sell. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because I was sort of leading the witness on triangulating that stuff, because I was thinking about an episode that we recorded with the gentleman by the name of Roy Ginsburg, who actually specializes exactly in selling firms. And he says the exact same thing that you did, Andrew, which was like basically, like the accountant math does not play out more often than not, because like you said, every single time you have a huge change, people are going to be reevaluating the nature of their relationship, right? So it's like it's not as transferable as a lot of people exist. On the flip side, though, I wanted to ask about one of the things too, and this is another sort of triangulation question. One of the things that I know is really, really important as far as somebody's market value as a candidate would be their book of business. What other valuable traits would somebody have? Or, can we talk about the book of business and how that really transfers to what your salary would be in an incoming firm?
Well, book of business is great. And first of all, I try to work with firms that it's not all about the book of business. I think a lot of firms have been burned on that, frankly, because again, if I've got $1 million book of business or $1.5 million, I think a lot of larger firms have gotten smarter over the years and they've institutionalized those clients for a variety of reasons. And a lot of them are just their client reasons, but they're also law firm reasons. If I bring in a client and now I'm doing 30% of their work, but I've got a labor and employment attorney that could do 10% of that client's work, and I've got a real estate partner that could do another 10% of that work. Well, now our tentacles are on that client. So the chances of that client going to another firm are few and far between. The downside of that is now I've got $1 million book of business. I may have brought them in, but now I've got 8 other people working on matters around here that they're happy with the firm. They're looking to stay put. So it may be a rock fight on the way out trying to take that $1 million book of business. And frankly, that's why a lot of law firms are spending a lot more time in diligence. They're doing what they call lateral partner questionnaires and all that, but it's almost the equivalent of like a 3-year tax audit. I mean, it's let me see the numbers in the most metric form out to the 5th decimal point over the last 3 years. How much have you billed them? How much have you collected? So they're looking for a lot of granular information off of that for a couple of reasons. I think it's weeding people out. People don't want to go through 17, 18 pages of all of that. And frankly, a lot of times they don't have access to it. But the other thing too is, like I said, the institutionalizing of the clients makes that tough for anybody to say, quote unquote, book of business. They could say they brought it. They could say, I'm the only person here who's servicing this and all that. That's great. The one thing I will tell you is if you ever look at like a mutual fund prospectus and they talk about, well, this is what the last 2 or 3 years performance has been. Well, that's great. That gives you a snapshot. What I work with attorneys on is creating, if they haven't already, a business plan, because the book of business is backward looking, whereas the business plan is forward looking. When you go in and you talk to a firm about what your goals are and you're able to have a conversation with, you know what, I have a corporate practice. I really need a litigation practice in these areas. Well, now I'm having a conversation about, If I had that, I believe I'd be able to bring in this much revenue. If I went to these if I do these 5 seminars a year, or if I went to this conference, which is really targeted to this specific industry, then I believe now you're talking about an investment of time. You're talking about an investment of resources, but you're also painting a picture of how I go out and get my clients. The old term about being an unconscious competent. I can't tell you how many attorneys I talk to that they have a $500,000 book of business. It's always in $500,000 increments, by the way. It's either a $500,000 book of business, $1 million. You never hear anybody say, I got about a $823,000 book of business. But when you ask them how they got it, well, you know what? Every year I go do these few things, and it just seems like I get good referrals and all that, but they're not able to put metrics around that. And then I talk to other attorneys that say, well, this is how I do it. I go to X amount of lunches a week. I have this amount of calls. This is how many. So they have a broader vision of these are the people I talk to. I once or twice a week, I do this, this, and this. Well, you know what? That paints a vision of profitability, which ultimately that's what the firm's going to care about that they're going to is, okay, let's say half that book of business doesn't follow you, but you at least have the business development chops that when you come in here, who do you need to talk to in that other practice area? It's a practice area leader or whatever like that for you to sit down and put together a business plan that says we're going to target these clients. When you get in front of those clients, do you know how to have a business conversation rather than just talking about your legal acumen and all the things you could do for them legally, but really kind of figuring out more about their business and their practice and how maybe you could bring in other business for other practice areas that aren't yours. Those are the types of things that because it just changes the conversation completely from what you've done in the past to how you're looking to do in the future. The other thing too is, frankly, it's the same thing with associates, is attitude. I think most attorneys of a certain level, you realize there's going to be a certain ego. People are fine with that. If you're an attorney who's a partner at a law firm and you can't respect somebody's ego they walked in with when they've done really well in their practice, that's going to be tough. You got to realize most of the folks that are going to be working are some sort of alpha dog, or type A personality or whatever like that. So if they're going to get there and be able to talk about their background and their experience and their, some of the things that they've accomplished, then great. But from an attitude perspective, again, you want partners that, I don't care if somebody's got a $5 million book of business. If they're going to come in here and 6 months later, half the people are going to want to leave because they're slamming doors and they're using 4-letter expletives or they're harassing people or whatever. Most firms don't want that. I don't care what the book of business is. It is very rare that you're going to have somebody that's going to want to bring somebody in like that, because it's going to hurt the firm culture overall. I don't know if that answers your question fully or not, but
no, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such an interesting perspective because it's like, I mean, people just kind of mention the book of business thing kind of offhand, but like, I mean, I think you've had a much more thorough look at it, which is like the book of business is kind of like whatever. It's like a principle, right? Versus if you have the business plan, that's like having cash flows that are coming in every time. And it's ultimately, especially considering that it's harder to transfer these things that a lot of people might realize, it absolutely makes sense to do the kind of stuff that that you're recommending people that are doing from a candidate perspective, because that just makes them more attractive. It's like, if you're buying a business, you're going to be in a better position. Like if you can consider any partner that you bring in kind of like a little mini acquisition of sorts, right? It's like, there's a reason why it takes $1.5 million to buy a McDonald's franchise, and you can, break ground in your own restaurant anywhere you want. It's the process. That's the difference in terms of what's the value coming from. So really, really interesting perspective.
The one other thing I'll tell you too is from a business plan perspective, and I tell this to attorneys all the time, is when you're creating them, it's a good exercise. I don't care if you're a solo law firm up to whatever, but it really becomes a list and I don't know if you do this like a pros and cons thing or whatever like that, but I kind of call it my tolerate, not tolerate list. Mm-hmm. If I'm looking to make a move to a firm and the firm I'm at right now, they're making me charge my clients, let's say $800 an hour. They want me to go to $850 or $9. This happened a lot, surprisingly, after the recession. And we're looking to get from our rates from $800. I'm like, during the worst time in history, you're going to make your rates go up $150 an hour to your clients. But some law firms were making that gamble that, hey, we're going to race to the top on those rates. But if you're an attorney that says, you know what, if I had more flexibility with my rates, and instead of $700, I could go into $500, $600, whatever like that, that would help me go after these specific types of clients that frankly I have to leave behind right now. Well, that's part of your business plan. So when you're interviewing with a law firm or you're evaluating your opportunities with law firms, well, I'm not going to want to go to a law firm that, now they're going to make me change or raise my rates by $100 an hour, or I'm on the low end of their rate. In 6 months from now, they're going to make me pump those up. If I'm going to go to a law firm that if I'm an IP attorney and all of a sudden now I'm going to have conflicts with them, that are going to come up all the time. Well, do I want to go to that law firm, or do I want to go to a law firm that I'm not going to have those conflicts with? Am I going to have associate support? Am I going to have administrative support? What is the ratio of associates to partners? If I'm not getting a better situation, and you can list those things, that really helps you go through the interview process. And again, it changes the conversation, because it's not you're interviewing me and we're in this subservient, I'm being interviewed, you're interviewing me. Instead, it's here's what I need to be able to take that next step in my practice. I've codified it. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. Here's where I've had success in the past. Here's where I've spent a lot of time that hasn't been fruitful, and I want to leave that stuff behind. Here's the stuff that is fruitful, and I want to multiply that. And here's how I need to multiply that. If you're not going to give me that, then let's go ahead and just, part company and say, thank you very much. And now's not the time, or whatever. But instead of interviewing with 15 firms, ideally, then you start interviewing with one or two. And then it's a lot more focused of a conversation. And again, when you're going after clients, let's just say this, for your small firms, your 1 to 5s, if I'm an estate planning attorney, well, you know what? I get a piece of business that comes through the door that's a personal injury case, and it may be a client of mine. They have, they got into a car accident. Now they want me to do that. You know what? It doesn't make financial sense for me to do that personal injury case. Now I may pop a big one, and I may make $1 million in contingency fees on that. But that one big one, if I sent that off to somebody who does that work specifically, and I can get a referral fee for that, well, now I'm not changing my business plan. I'm not changing what I'm doing. I could focus on doing what I'm doing. So when people come to me, they know I'm not just taking anything that comes through the door. No, I'm an estate planning attorney. This is what I do, and this is why I'm focused on doing what I do. I'm not just, hey, you know what? I got a DUI issue, and I got this. Sometimes it's really tough to walk away from business that it's, you could do. But when you have that list of things that you're willing to do and not willing to do, and you're able to focus your efforts, it just makes your conversations with your prospective clients, with prospective law firms, with yourself, when you say, I don't need to do all that. I'll give you an example. I get asked all the time, hey, do you ever place paralegals or legal assistants? I don't. They'll change jobs for $1,000 in a raise. Not to be disrespectful or whatever, but that's just, I don't want to have to manage that. I don't want to have to manage. First of all, I got to find somebody, and I'm going to place them, and then 2 months later, they're going to make a move to someplace else I don't want to deal with that. And so to me, that's very freeing. I very, very rarely work with associates, because that's just not where my sweet spot is. So trying to figure out those things that you're willing to tolerate, where you're willing to tolerate them, and then moving forward, it just makes the conversation, it frees you up. It's very freeing to do that.
Yeah, I gotta say, it's mutually beneficial too. Like, who wouldn't on either side of that equation want to have a situation where people are looking for alignment? But segue, as far as your specialty, Andrew, what would be the best thing? So if people are liking what they're hearing, who are the best people who should be reaching out to you, and on either side of the equation, and how would they go about getting in touch with you?
Sure. If you're a law firm that says, hey, you know what, and it could be attorneys that are in their 40s or 50s, and you say, hey, you know what happens if somebody ends up passing away or has an illness or whatever? What's our plan? We all like each other. We all know each other. Maybe we came from a big law firm together, but is there a plan? Is there an outside resource that would be able to codify what a succession plan would look like? And if you're looking to bring people in, maybe what that would look like, not just finding an associate or finding a junior partner, but what are some of those things that they would need? So from a succession standpoint, any group that may be in their 30s, 40s, all the way up to their 60s, you could always do some of that stuff as well. If they're 5 years out, 3 years out, whatever, I'm happy to have those conversations. If you're a smaller law firm that says, hey, you know what, I'd like to bring in another partner that maybe does, if I'm in estate planning, I'm looking for a corporate, I'm looking for a real estate partner. Can you help me find that? Or I'm I got a good practice, but I'm tired of the administrative side of this. I don't want to join a mega firm, but how can I merge my practice in with another firm and maybe become a beachhead for them in a certain area or something like that? Those are really the areas I'd love to work with folks on. I do a lot of business planning. I do a lot of client development planning with law firms. They may be really good attorneys, but they've never had a business conversation, or they are at that $500,000 mark and they want to get to $1 million or $1.5 million. And that just seems like a huge mountain for them to be able to climb. When in fact, a lot of times it's the stuff that they're doing that they could stop doing that would free up time, that they could spend more time and resources in areas where they're more fruitful, that I could help them navigate as well. So from and the client development thing is always funny, because I talk to law firms that, you know what, if we have you come in and we have you train our associates, all they're going to do is build a book of business and want to leave. How are you going to make those attorneys partners someday and expect them to make a book of business when all they've known is how to practice law and they've never had to, have a business conversation or walk somebody through a quote unquote sales process? So I try to work with firms like that. I do firm retreats where I'll come in for a couple of hours and talk to them about a variety of things, whether it's succession planning or client development and those type of things. So those really kind of I guess if I could put those all in a bundle for them. So
yeah. And what's the best way to reach out to you, Andrew?
You can reach me by emailing at Andrew@Wilcox, WILCOX -legal.com, or you can call me you can call or text at 850-274-7849. I say text because it's funny. Nobody calls anymore. Most voicemails are full saying, I don't check my voicemail. But it's funny. People will text all the time. People text me in the middle of mediations and depositions and everything else.
Yeah. That's super right. And it's actually funny. You reminded me of a quote too. I think this is Zig Ziglar. I mean, on the training side of things, people always say like, hey, well, what if I train my people and they leave? And it's like, well, what if you don't train them and they stay?
Exactly.
Not kind of either. But all right. Well, I super appreciate all the time that you take, Andrew. And this has been a really interesting, wide-ranging conversation. I really may have had an opportunity to go a little bit more into the business development stuff, but we'll leave the door open for another conversation down the line. But thank you again so much for coming. And for everybody else, I will see you next Tuesday at 8 a.m. Eastern on the Law Firm Growth Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Law Firm Growth Podcast. For show notes, free resources, and more, head on over to casefuel.com/podcast. Looking forward to catching up on the next episode.